Let's talk about the cave diving equipment used in our last episode where we took INTD Intro to Cave Diver training in today's episode on the Dive Saga channel. Well, hello guys and welcome back to another episode on the Dive Saga channel. If you watched yesterday's episode, or at least the previous episode on this channel, then you have seen my take on the INTD Intro to Cave Diver training, which is a course that I just took here in beautiful Tulum in Mexico. If you want to know the specifics about cave diver training, cavern, intro to cave or full cave, you can always check out that video, but of course you need to also find a cave diving instructor. Now, a lot of you responded really well to an episode from a few months ago where we talked about all the diving equipment that I used during my ice diver training. So I figured I'd make another accompany video to yesterday's video where we talk about the equipment used in the cave diver course. Just a quick heads up, I am a part of the Scuba Pro Global Dive team. That means that they help me out with a lot of diving equipment. I am historically very much a Scuba Pro aficionado. That doesn't mean that one brand makes all the equipment the best there is. And if you have the choice, you can always choose different items. This is just what I use. A lot of this works really well in my opinion, but of course, do your own shopping around, ask your instructor as well, try some different equipment and see what works for you. Remember, if you like scuba diving content, you can always subscribe to the Dive Saga channel. We typically produce episodes every 2 weeks about a variety of diving topics. Just today, there is an extra episode after yesterday's. Intro to cave, yeah? For intro to cave diving, we more or less need the full cave diving setup. And so what I used was, let's start with the exposure. A lot of cave divers will use dry suits, especially for those long cave dives. That's not super necessary per se. In this case, the water was at 23 degrees Celsius. I'll put below what that is in Fahrenheit. And so a 5 mil wetsuit, yeah, works really well, in my case at least. So, that's what I ended up using, 5mm full wetsuit. And you can opt to choose to use a hood. That can also help with a little bit of protection. You should not be bumping into anything, but if you are wearing a hood, that's an extra layer of protection right there. And then of course, as well, the booties, right? Very basic is to use fins that are open heel fins. You can't really use those tropical closed foot fins. Yeah, you use open heel fins with booties. So in my case, I use the Scuba Pro jet fins. Yeah, little note about that: they're very heavy. They're very negatively buoyant. They work really well with a dry suit. That's what I use. If you check out our ice diving equipment episode, you will see that's perfect to trim out your otherwise very buoyant feet. When you're going to use a wetsuit, this is now very heavy. Yeah, so you're gonna need to work extra hard and work with your weights as well to redistribute some of that weight and get a nice horizontal profile. But they work really well, of course, for all the different finning techniques. That is something to talk about. You're gonna be frog kicking, back finning, you're gonna be helicopter turning, and you need to be able to be proficient in that. Typically, with overly designed fins or split fins, other things like that, you're not gonna be able to do that. Yeah, I don't know very many people who can back fin in a split fin, for instance. So you need a nice rigid scooping fin, as I call them, open heel, yeah, with the booties. Typically you don't wear gloves. You can if it's really long and you get cold, but you are gonna need your dexterity to deal with a variety of issues, to perform a variety of tasks. So it is not uncommon to not wear any exposure protection on your hands unless it is in a particularly cold environment. Then you can do this in back mount doubles or in side mount. I chose for side mounts. The side mount setup that I own is I have an X-Deep Tech RB. That's actually with a redundant bladder. Not so necessary for cave diving, but it is what I have. And so, yeah, you can, of course, there are other brands, right? Other configurations for side mount that you can certainly choose. X-Deep is what I own. Works really well, but you always, you can't just take it out of the box. You're always gonna need to work a little bit to get your trim sorted, because again, that horizontal positioning, that perfectly balanced out trim, that's important for cave diving to protect the cave environment and to not cause any stirring up of sediment. Then the regulators, right? You have, again, a lot of choice, but what I would say is very important is to use performant regulators. You need high quality, well-performing regulators. If you're gonna be diving side mount, you're probably gonna want regulators that have a turret, right? So regulators that can swivel. Otherwise, you're gonna have very awkward hose routing. Definitely take side mount diver training before trying to use side mount diving equipment. Side mount diver training is not part of cave diver training, so it's a separate course that you will have to take. I use the Scuba Pro Mark 19 Black Tech and then the G260 Carbon Black Tech as my second stage. Why? Well, they have the swivel, they have the turret. The Mark 25 has that as well, but the difference is that the Mark 19 is environmentally sealed. Yeah, it's not like the caves are so super dirty or full of sediment, but it can happen. And so having an environmentally sealed regulator is not a crazy luxury. The G260, on the other hand, that's known to be one of at least Scuba Pro's most performant regulators. Yeah, it's really a powerhouse. The carbon version is slightly lighter. So if you're gonna be doing longer dives, then it's very useful to have something in your mouth that requires a bit less effort to keep in your mouth. You of course need two of those. That's the side mount setup. Again, that's something that you learn in side mount diver training. On top, you're also gonna need lights, right? So you cannot just go cave diving without lights, of course. So as a primary light, you're probably gonna want something that has significant battery power. Yeah, that's why it is very advisable to use what is known as a canister light. Canister light has the battery compartment separate from the light unit. This is an Orca torch, the 630D or D630 rather. Again, this is not necessarily me saying that that's what you have to get. I like it because this one specifically can also swivel, so you can actually toggle between using it in back mount doubles configuration, side mount configuration, so it helps with routing the wire in appropriate direction. And this one has an insane burn time as well. Yeah, so on maximum luminosity burns up to 5-6 hours, and in its lowest setting it's something like 24 hours. I don't know about you, but that's longer than any cave dive that I plan on doing in the near future. Yeah, and then of course they need the Goodman handle so that you still have full dexterity while you are using your light. Yeah, so there you go. Very nice, works really well, and then a variety of attachment options so that you can stow it when not in use. There are some exercises where that's necessary. You're also gonna want two backup lights. Yeah, so this is just a typical backup light, the Scuba Pro light in my case, because that's what I have. Two of those that are accessible and that you can use. Definitely don't cheap out on your dive light solutions. Yeah, you are in an overhead environment away from ambient light, so I mean, this is pretty important, as you can imagine. Instrument-wise, you're obviously gonna need a dive computer. Small little bit of advice there is to pick a dive computer that has a backlit screen. Yeah, most dive computers will have a built-in light, but it is really handy if it's just permanently lit up, of course. You may choose to use two dive computers. Yeah, that's not super crazy. On my dive computer, that's where I attach a Z knife. Yeah, that way it sits on my wrist and is very easy to reach. This computer also has a built-in compass. You may choose to have a analog compass. Yeah, just again, if too much functionality is inside the computer, yeah, then a computer failure becomes an exponential failure, whereas a analog compass doesn't typically fail on the dive. So that's pretty inexpensive and really good to have, yeah, to set your bearings, know which way you're diving. You always follow lines, of course, in cave diving, but you don't want to depend solely on the line for knowing roughly where you are, right? Then we have some other specialized equipment for cave diving that we use. So of course you're gonna need pocket solutions. Yeah, if you use a side mount system, back mount system, you need to store things in places. So this is a back pouch. Yeah, so this goes on your butt, essentially in side mount. And then this here is a thigh pouch. So this one specifically can be stored on your thigh. That way you can distribute your resources a little bit in case something gets compromised. Very important though is that you have a way of clipping stuff inside these pouches, yeah, so that things don't go and lead their own life. So in this pouch, for instance, you will find a spare mask, yeah, very basic emergency equipment. What else might you stow in those pouches? For instance, some wet notes, yeah? So this is very handy to communicate if necessary, but also just as some reminders or some basic dive planning, especially when you're in training, like in my case, I do like to just write down a whole bunch of stuff that I can reference during training. That helps me with some refreshing some pieces of knowledge. Then we have also our markers, yeah. So this is obviously something that your instructor will instruct you to obtain, but you're gonna need some personal line markers that have your name written on it. It's already a little bit faded because the top one, I used it a lot. And you're gonna need some arrows as well. Again, how those are used, maybe don't use this video as instructional information, but when you follow your cave diver training, you will certainly be instructed on how to use those, and they can absolutely help you in some sticky situations or for some navigational decisions, yeah. And of course, everything needs to be clipped away, stowed away so that it can't snag, etc. Reels, so you're going to need a primary reel that you can hold on to that holds a significant amount of line, yeah. So in this particular case, this is a Scuba Pro reel. Again, you have choices there. It has a lock, yeah, and then of course you have your line here. You will be using this extensively in your cave diver training, and so having proper reel is not a bad investment at all. You're also gonna need some safety spools, yeah? So that's a bit up to you what you want to choose. This is a very simple Scuba Pro spool, safety spool. I like it because this one you can actually hold the disc in the middle and then it spins, yeah? So that's kind of handy to use. You use this for a variety of emergency drills, yeah? So that one as well is something that you need. And that is roughly the cave diver equipment setup. Some people choose to wear helmets, yeah, either for protecting their head, although really you should not be making contact with the environment. Also because helmets can have light attachments to them, which helps with being hands-free. But that's what we used. Go check out the cave diver training video if you haven't yet. And you can also go check out the ice diving equipment video if that kind of stuff interests you. Either way, you should consider subscribing to the Dive Saga channel for scuba diving content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.